All right, welcome to Noble Insights podcast. I am thrilled today to have Jimmy Holt with me. He is the co-founder and CEO of Grafted Strategies. So Jimmy, welcome.
Josh, man, thank you so much. We're so glad to be here, man. First time for me, so you might have to give me some pointers as I go through this, right? So I can get my Joe Rogan on.
Let's go. We can talk about aliens and politics, and we could take this a whole nother level for 3 hours.
Make all friends right off the bat.
So Jimmy, where are you from originally?
So originally from East Tennessee. If you can't place the accent, apologies. I was at a soccer tournament all last week for the NCAA. My daughter was playing, and I've screamed so much over the last couple of weeks that the voice has been better, but the accent never goes away.
Never goes away. Well, congrats on, was it 16, Sweet 16?
We made it to the Sweet 16.
Well, congratulations. That's going to be a memory that you and she will have probably for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. It was great.
Yeah. So you grew up in East Tennessee. Did you go to school in Tennessee or did you go somewhere else?
No, I grew up, my parents both worked together in a family business, and I was very much a part of that growing up. I swore I was going to move off and go to college somewhere else. But as I got older and saw some opportunities that were there, I decided that I would stick around. And so I actually went to school really close, went to a college called Carson Newman. It was a college when I went there. It's Carson Newman University now. They grew up a little bit. So it was right there in East Tennessee. If you know where Interstate 40 meets Interstate 81, that's pretty much X marks the spot.
Sure. That's great. What'd you study?
I was a business major. So I studied business management, had a couple of really good guys there that were professors that had come out of the world of IBM that had some really good hands-on experience that I really appreciated, that blended well now with what we do here in the software world, but was always a little bit of a nerd on the side as well.
So how did you go from in college, tell me about the path to get to where you are today of founding a company?
Yeah, how long do we have? So interestingly enough, the route to the world of technology, if you will, started kind of out of necessity, to be honest. My parents, like I said, they had a business. It was a manufacturing business. We were in the lighting furniture world. My parents had never had a computer system. I learned accounting on 16 column legal pads, right, the old-fashioned way, which was great. But during that time, as I was in school and as we were learning about ERPs and accounting software and CRMs, one of the things that I hoped to bring back and came back to the business with was, hey, we need to computerize some of this, right? We know inventory tracking was a nightmare. Tracking bill of materials and expensing and cost was always a challenge. The initial place for that we got started was, how do we start with something that we can bite off and chew? I had gone through a class where we were learning about Microsoft Access of all things. The project started working on the ability to create what we would now call a CPQ system, to be able to do quotes, be able to generate invoices, purchase orders off of that. And that's kind of where it started. I spent several weeks, just kind of threw myself into it, discovered that I really enjoyed that. The whole structured database world kind of clicked. Even though it was Microsoft Access and what it could do was exceedingly limited to what we're accustomed to now. Sure. But started there, got that up, got that working, got some computer terminals in front of some folks, and found that really significantly boosted not only what we could do from a timing perspective, right? Because everything was being done on 3-part forms where you had to hand fill these out.
Yeah.
The ability to recreate those, clone those, be able to do something fast for an order was just exceedingly difficult. And so that was the first foray, if you will. That's where I got my feet wet. And very shortly after that, we discovered that through the University of Tennessee that they actually had, and that was available for small businesses, where they would supplement and actually had some grants available for small businesses in East Tennessee to up their technology game. So through that, had a chance to work with a professor who introduced us to an ERP, excuse me. And he actually came on site.
All good.
Like I said, that voice is still kicking out. I apologize.
Well, it's all good.
Yeah. So, this professor came and literally sat next to this freshman in college for 2 weeks, and we did a just lightning speed installation of a software that was called Macola, which was this big multi-disc, multi-solution platform for inventory and accounting and bill of materials and accounts payable and accounts receivable, right?
Wow.
Name all the modules. And through that, that's how we went live on ERP, and that's was my initial instruction. Like I said, it was a crash course, and it was a crash launch as well. It was there was a lot of fun there. But from that, learned a lot. Actually, rebooted and started over and worked through that process at a much more manageable pace, if you will, with everyone involved there in the organization. And that was two things. It was my first introduction into the complexities, one of software and accounting, and how those things work together. But more importantly, it was a huge learning curve on the importance of change management. Right? Just going from a 10 key calculator to a computer system, it was a shock.
Yeah, I'm sure. So you had some great experience in college, it sounds like, with really hands-on projects, essentially. I mean, how do you teach something like that, like an ERP go live when you're a freshman in college?
It was a very, very interesting, painful learning experience.
That's right.
All right.
So you finished up your degree at college, and then what did you do after school?
So my wife and I attended college together. We were both in the business department. We got married at the end of my I graduated on May 13th. We got married on May 20th. She still had a year of school left. We had an opportunity for her to come work with us. And from that, the reason why I mention that is just because we were always, from the very beginning, very much involved in kind of an entrepreneurial kind of lifestyle. I had grown up in it. Jessica was brilliant. And so from there, we launched a couple of different businesses. We were, in addition to still working in the manufacturing business, managing sales and marketing and a burgeoning technology stack at this point. We started a couple of restaurants.
What kind?
The best comparison I would say is kind of like Panera Bread, kind of a breakfast, lunch kind of place. That was a lot of fun for a few years. I'm glad to be out of that world, to be honest. And then I also had a construction company, Custom Homes.
Wow.
So yeah, we've had, and I still say we, because she was so heavily involved in all of those things that we were doing.
Yep.
Even to this day, we're still very much a team when it comes to a lot of these things. I'm glad to have her around to bounce things off of.
Yeah, that's huge.
From there, we eventually moved from East Tennessee to the Raleigh area. At that point in time, I was involved with a company called Adecco. Really long story short, had a chance to build a tracking software for candidate tracking for their strategic accounts team. Because it needed to be separate, kind of outside the regular candidate tracking system that was already in place.
Okay.
It also had to be tied together with some different placement statistics that had to go into how we reported back into some different MSP programs.
Okay.
And I had a chance to build that. Once again, fell back on Access. By this point in time, had the advantage of being able to build a front end in Access, but actually connect to Microsoft SQL, which much more robust and much more capable as far as what we could do, especially with multi-user environment. Mm-hmm. And then one day had a chance to demonstrate that to one of our other sister organizations. And the gentleman who was there, who oversaw a similar type of role, more IT specific on that side, mentioned, "Hey, have you ever seen Salesforce?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know what Salesforce is, but I've never worked with it." And he said, "I think that with what you've done in Access, you would find that a platform that you would appreciate." And he sent me a license a few days later, set me up with a sandbox.
Cool.
From there, that's where we are now. I had a chance to take an application that had taken me several weeks to initially build, and then probably 6 to 9 months of tweaking to get it the way that we wanted it to be and the way we wanted it to work. Over the course of the July 4th holiday with the Salesforce license, I was able to recreate everything that I had built before.
Wow.
I was kind of amazed, especially, to take a software that I had zero experience with. I think it speaks to how manageable, how accessible the Salesforce platform is and what you can do with it really quickly.
Yeah, that story right there.
You appreciate what they've done.
Well, that's probably what he imagined that companies would be able to do with. I remember when Salesforce came out, they have these little stickers called software, and then there'd be a byte taken out of the disk, because it's
Right.
like Salesforce is taking a bite out of, on-premise software, this concept of the cloud. They were really driving a lot of that initially, and how easy and fast implementations and ease of use.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
you're the
think the
poster
thing
child
that
for that, for sure.
was so transformative was that initial entry into the world of cloud software.
Yep.
The challenge that we faced with every database that I worked on and that we deployed was, number one, you had your hardware requirements that you had to keep and manage and have set up.
Mm-hmm.
But then the ability for that server architecture to stay in sync with 40, 50 different users across the country, and there to be no errors, and deal with the complexities of record locking and record access and the security that went into that. All of that burden was removed.
Yeah.
And so it was transformative. You could focus on functionality and what drove the business need instead of the underlying structure, hardware, software, tying those things together. It just revolutionized what and how fast you could do it.
Wow. So when Grafted Strategies was born,
Shortly after. So from there, I had a chance to move into a larger role overseeing sales solutions for Adecco North America.
Okay.
I got to work under a gentleman that was one of their VPs that was a brilliant guy who had taken Salesforce at the North American level because it was available globally. There was a global instance of Salesforce, but had taken it from a very basic, fancy Rolodex, if you will, that many of the other countries were using it as. Hey, here's an easy way to track activities and keep phone numbers and names and put that in one place, to using it for more operational type roles. That started with expanding some service capabilities, ticketing cases, and different things along those lines, but had grown into being able to process offers. And while e-signature wasn't necessarily a portion of this, the ability to send an agreement, for example, with terms and conditions and bill rates and timing and all of those things to an individual, click into that and have an interface where that could be managed. It was secure. The person could accept the terms. Once again, had taken something that had been done either by fax machine or scanned into an email and sent off to something that was click this link and you've accepted it and the person's ready to go with onboarding paperwork and all the rest that goes on with that. So I say that to say I had a chance to come into an environment where, once again, my vision of what was possible just got expanded. Tying back to our professor at Tennessee, I've just had a really unique opportunity in several different places to connect with people that were willing to pour in, right? That were able to say, hey, here's someone who's got some interest and I've got some knowledge and I'm willing to share it. And from that, back to your question, the desire to do that same thing was kind of what led into the consulting world initially with a group and with a company called Idle Tools that I worked with from 2015 to 2018. And saw, see that start and grow. Mm-hmm. And then that company was actually sold to a larger partner out of Canada that was eventually bought by Deloitte. So, it was cool to see that ride. From that, Grafted was born out of that transaction that occurred when Idle Tools was sold.
What is the purpose of you founding a company like Grafted? Like, what do you really hope to deliver and accomplish for your clients?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. It was at a time when Salesforce was in a rapid expansion, a lot of growth. But the one thing about it was very transactional in nature. By that, I just mean that we were working with Salesforce AEs. I'd be stacked back to back from 8 o'clock until 6 o'clock at night with calls.
Right.
And it was how many projects, how many implementations can we get done in this given time period? And I think we did a really, really good job with those. It was a lot of fun. It was continuous change. There was a lot of momentum. The velocity was very high. But the one thing that was missing from it, to tie back to what we were talking about a second ago, is there was very little time or opportunity to get to pour into the organization and the people that are a part of that, and to really open their eyes to what was possible, not just with Salesforce, but with their technology stack as a whole. How those things could be integrated together, for example, how workflows and automations could be done. And the thing that was so key about that in the opportunities where we had a chance to do that, I should say, is that those were the ones that were transformational, right? We came into organizations that had great sales teams, they had momentum, they needed capabilities to keep everyone on track and together. And Salesforce did a great job of that, a lot of times right out of the box. But, I always like to say we can build the best CRM or sales management platform that's possible, but it won't make bad salespeople good salespeople.
Well,
Right.
When's that module coming out?
Maybe that's a lesson that I missed. So, if anyone out there has the training for that, I'd love to hear it. So, why is that important? Well, we can promise that the CRM, right, it's going to boost your sales. The average sales for an organization is going to go up about 30% or whatever the number might be. But once again, right, like if that salesperson is not making calls and is not building relationships and is not understanding the market conditions, nothing is going to help that. They'll just be recording less activities, right? You'll identify who the bad salespeople are maybe a little bit quicker, right? Case. But in the places where we got to work with a company where we could see not only sales, not just marketing, not just service, but operationally, how do they do their day to day? Where are they losing time on repetitive tasks, on analytics that's having to be done monthly, for example? That was a place where when we had a chance to do that, and we could bring that onto Salesforce, and at the end of the launch, 4 months, 6 months in, we could measure and say, over the course of the last 6 months, we've saved you 1,200 hours of labor, onboarding, training, being able to take quality people and move them onto a task that is more meaningful, hugely transformative. And so the idea of Grafted was born out of that, and the name is really kind of a piece of that. We don't want to be a implementation partner, right? And we're on to the next person and you never hear from us again. We want to start foundationally, work with you, see what your needs are, shape that from a licensing to capabilities to what the needs are, mold that so that you're getting what you need when you need it, and then being a part of, like, for example, with a lot of our clients, we attend their monthly, weekly sales meetings, operations meetings, marketing meetings. They have their discussions just like they would normally. And if there's something that is a new idea, for example, that they want to pursue, we're immediately available to say, hey, right, you've already got the platform to do this. Here's how we can make it work. Here's how we can build that into the architecture of what's already there and make that delivery, that launch date much, much sooner from the perspective of, we're not having to source a new software. We're not having to look for a new solution. We're not having to bring on a third party for some other piece of the management of this piece. And so we really want to be grafted into the team, right? That's the whole idea, that our team becomes a part of your team and we're working together towards one goal.
That's a great visual.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. And so what do you think? I mean, at this point, let's just say take the CRM component of Salesforce. That's obviously now standard across the industry. If you're a sales organization, you have a CRM. And that's really not even a question anymore. You've got to be able to track your deals, your clients, your contacts. That's all in a central place, right? It's not in a spreadsheet. It's not in a Rolodex. So it's in place. And then there's lots of add-ons that you can bring to the table for the CRM and the Marketing Cloud, Service Cloud, various things you can add on to that to make it even better. Right. However, there's still a lot of people that are implementing very bad CRMs. Right. And even if they're getting Salesforce, sometimes they don't put in proper process or strategy where they end up making it more difficult for their team to engage it, or they're not tracking the right things.
Correct.
And therefore, it's just creating a lot of friction. What are like the top 3 mistakes that companies make when they implement Salesforce?
It's a great question. So the first one is always going to be the data. And that data mistake exists in multiple forms. And many times it's multiple of these forms that are feeding into the same problem. But The one that we would typically is right off the bat is a client is migrating, let's say, from an existing system. It could even be an existing Salesforce implementation that has gone sideways or gone south or whatever the reason is. There's been no structure, to your point, put in around processes around like what's a requirement for defining when a lead becomes an account. What information is necessary in order for a lead to be an account or for an account to have an opportunity that we're going to pursue, for example. Those foundational choices leads to just a system where, we've got 10,000 accounts in the system. Half of them have an email address or a website listed. Some of them have no contacts. We've got 500 contacts where it's just a last name. And there's all kinds of variations of that. Yeah. Now, what I'll say there is that you can go the opposite way with that. You can go to the company that says, hey, you know what? There's 300 data points we want to know about an account, and we're going to make every one of them required, right? You have to find the balance. We certainly, we data enrichment is exceedingly valuable. Mm-hmm. There's ways of doing that without putting that burden and turning every one of your salespeople into, a secretary, for example, sure. The data entry person. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of key one. The other thing is when we're migrating that data, what does it look like? How much needs to go into the standardization of that, bringing it up to spec with what we want it to be going forward? Not putting the effort in there initially is just going to snowball from there on out, from the standpoint of now your reporting is not good. Your people that are using it, that do decide that one day, hey, what's that person's phone number? And they go to look it up and it's not there, right? All trust and hope is lost in the system, or a number's not being kept up to date, or, right. What have you. So data is always going to be the first key, right? It doesn't matter the platform, the data has to be good. There can be a lot of management of change that goes on with that, because you have the salesperson that knows everyone in their sales patch, has their numbers and names memorized, but there's no place where that's standardized. There's no place where it's kept. Heaven forbid they're out sick. Now we're at a loss as to what we can do. That ties into the second piece, which is the process that just goes along with that, as far as we've got to make sure that everyone who's going to be using the system understands its value. And that value is not always self-evident, especially from the beginning. So we have to do a really good job of showing what future state value can look like. And that's not based on the fact that we can itemize every phone call and email and activity and, appointment that they've set for the benefit of management. We've got to make sure that they see the benefit on how it's going to put more dollars in their pocket. Especially if we're talking about sales reps. That can differ obviously with different roles, but in particular, anything that we do that's adding to the person's work, taking them away from their ability to sell more product or to present more opportunities in front of people.
Can you give me an example of like 2 or 3 things that would help them see how this is helping me drive revenue for myself?
Yeah, absolutely.
And not just more tasks that I have to do.
So I think some of the ones that are the most valuable is from the sales side is 2 things. The first one is allowing a sales rep to have very intimate and in-depth knowledge of what's going on in that account at any given time. That could be a combination of, what orders they've placed historically, what have they ordered? Do we have back orders that haven't been shipped? Was there a problem with the last order, right? So tracking that customer sentiment, tying that in together. And that's not always as simple as just sending out a CSAT and seeing what the score comes back in, right? If you're going to go into an existing client and say, are you ready to place a follow-up order? And you're not aware that the last order had a huge problem from them, right? You're just opening yourself up to look like you're unfamiliar with what's going on, which you are, right? You can't keep up with them. So I think that's really key. The other one is making sure that we make their sales process easier, right? What does that look like? I think of a lot of times we've done a lot of work with companies that are in the building materials world, for example. Their quotes oftentimes are based on takeoffs from a set of plans. They can be exceedingly time consuming to build out a list of all the things that they need. One of the areas that we focused on in that place is how can we allow them to enter in some basic information? For example, square footage of the roof, square footage of wall, square footage of flooring, linear feet of trim, whatever it might be. And then from that, allow them to select a component or an item that's going to be presented as a solution for that particular need, and it do the calculations for them, right? It builds the quote for them as they go. Thinking through what does the process look like? How do they want to present it? If you're in a scenario where you're doing building, once again, just to continue that idea, sometimes they want that broken up into kitchen, bathroom, master bedroom, and present it so that there's an itemized or cost basis that's associated with a particular area or a particular room. And so making sure that we provide the necessary foundation, if you will, so that now their day-to-day work is as easy as entering in a few dimensional numbers and then selecting an item and now it breaking that out across the spectrum. Those are areas that you have to get a little more intimate with what the process looks like for these reps. How do they present it? What does it look like? What would they like for it to look like? Sometimes their hands have been tied. And so finding those ways to make, once again, their life easier. They can go from turning out 3 quotes in a day to 10 quotes in a day. Now they've got time the next day to follow up so that they're not losing or not falling behind another alternative that the customer may have a better relationship with or a closer tie to. Now we have time to make sure that we're the one that's the voice that's being heard.
Okay. Well, listen, I think if anybody out there is looking to really up their Salesforce game and create an environment that's going to help their, not only the management and the success of their overall implementation, but actually help their sales team close more business, then sounds like you guys should get together with Grafted Strategies and figure out a way to make this work.
We would love to do it. We practice what we preach. Everything we do, from sales service through our accounting, our time capture, we do it all in Salesforce. There's literally no process from running a business, especially on the sales side and marketing side, that we can't demo live from our own world and show how it works.
Wow.
And I've had some people give some really great suggestions on that, from a process standpoint or from an idea standpoint.
Okay.
We love that collaboration. To that point, we practice what we preach, and we hope that we can make a difference for others.
Jimmy, thank you so much for coming on. Please come back. We can talk some more about this, and I'd love to kind of dive into even some more stories about case studies and successes you've had, and really kind of dive deep into how you're really making a difference for people with these environments.
We'd love to. Yeah. Josh, right. We so appreciate the invite. Appreciate what you do for us. So.
All right, Jimmy, thank you so much.
All right, have a good day.
All right.